In this session we're going to look at the coding of documents. Now, when a business produces a document or receives a document from another business or a customer, it's important that the information that is recorded is correct on that document, and also that we then record the information that's contained on that document accurately in the business's books. The reason for this is because we want to make sure that the invoices or credit notes record the right customer or supplier, that the correct goods are included on those documents, and that the right prices are used. We also want to make sure that those documents are then recorded in the right prime books of entry, as well as the right ledger accounts. Then we want to ensure that those documents can be identified nice and easily, and also retrieved quickly if they're required at a later point. Now, coding our documents will help us achieve that. So it's going to help us reduce the number of errors that are made in a business's books. So what is coding? Well, it's a coding system makes sure that all documents have some form of reference number that's unique to that document, and that we record that reference in our accounting books so that there's what's called traceability. So if there is a query at a later point, we can go to that transaction in the books. We can then identify which document that transaction relates to, and we can then find that document nice and easily and hopefully resolve any query or dispute. There are a number of different types of coding systems that are out there. The most common being the numeric system, where every document has a sequential number attached to it. Now, different types of documents will actually have different numbering systems. So, for instance, the sales invoice, we'll have sales invoices numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, or they might start at a particular number and build up from there. But the purchase invoices would also have a numeric system, but this would be independent of the numeric system used on those sales invoices. We also have alphabetical systems. So, for instance, this is where documents are filed alphabetically. So we might have all of our supplier files recorded alphabetically in a room somewhere. And our last type is an alphanumeric coding system. This is a mixture of numeric and alphabetical. So we've got both letters and numbers in our codes. So this can, for instance, be used to help us identify document types. So we might have each sales invoice might be numbered SI and then followed by a sequential number. And then PI would represent purchase invoice, again followed by a sequential number. And that way, when anyone gives us a sales invoice reference number, we can clearly identify that we're dealing with a sales invoice or a purchase invoice right from the off. Alphanumeric codes are also often used to help us identify customers or supplier accounts in our sales and purchase ledger. So, for instance, we might have the example at the front, WEL002. Well, that might tell us that we're dealing with a customer whose name starts with WEL, for instance, and then we have a numeric element to distinguish between all of those customers whose name begins with those three letters. Now there is a slight difference when we think about coding and the practicalities of implementing it between those documents that are prepared by the business itself and those documents that are prepared by third parties and are then received by the business in due course, so such as suppliers or perhaps banks and so on. With the documents that are prepared by the business itself, that coding that will be used will be included in the templates for our sales invoices and other documents, and the coding will be set up to fit in with our bookkeeping requirements. So for instance, on a sales invoice produced by a business, that's going to include a unique sales invoice number, a customer reference. It might include product codes as well. And later on, that business might also add a little bit of coding, perhaps to show that those documents have now been recorded in the books and who has actually recorded them. So that's reasonably straightforward. Where we have documents that are being prepared by third parties, however, the references on those documents are going to be the third party's references, so the supplier's references, and those references are not going to fit into the business's own coding system. So we've then got to add some coding to the normal items that are included on the supplier's invoice, for example, to make sure that those documents are recorded correctly in the business's books. So let's have a look at one common way of achieving this. So many businesses will use a coding somewhat similar to what's shown on the left hand side of the screen at the moment. So this is a table which will be completed and it's going to be stamped on the supplier document, or perhaps it might be attached to the supplier document in some other way. Once that's done, it's then going to be completed by the purchase ledger clerk or bookkeeper, who's going to enter all of the information requested onto that stamped document. So when we look at the sorts of information that will be included, and please note that each business may put in or require different items to the one shown on the screen at the moment, but these are fairly common. So we'd have the business's own reference for that purchase invoice. Again, this is going to be sequential so that it be easily found at a later point. We'd include the reference of this supplier in the sales ledger. That way, whoever enters the information in the sales ledger will be able to find the relevant account in the sales ledger very easily. We'll also include the general ledger account. So this is the reference for the type of cost that has been invoiced for by our supplier, so that we can find where the net amount needs to be recorded in the business's general ledger. We might include a box which says, check to goods received note, or perhaps to the delivery note, or to the order reference. And this is to try and make sure that the goods have been received, the goods that we're being billed for, and that the goods were ordered in the first place. And it's probably a good idea to record just the initials or the name of the person who's done this work, so that we can identify them at a later point if there is any query or confusion over what has been done. All of these coding codes that we're adding onto our supplier documents are there to try and make it easier to both trace the documents at a later point and hopefully make sure that the invoice is checked and it's accurately recorded.